All right, okay, so let's get started. And so I'm going to, so today's topic is about networking. Ariel, were you at the first session? We had session one, which was a little bit of an introductory session. Were you at that session?
Yeah, I am.
You were, okay.
Yeah.
So this is session two. And today we will talk about networking that is specific to mostly to the written component of it, right? So the initial stages of reaching out to people, building up your network, using LinkedIn to build up your network, using your alumni network from the school, leveraging that. And then session three is where we cover more sort of the networking that happens in person. So that's a little bit more down the road. And you go to career fairs, you meet employers, you do informational interviews, and then how you present yourself and the things you say as an international student. Like, what sort of message do you want to convey to these employers? So we'll cover that in session three, and today we'll cover more the written component and the initial component of building up your network. Okay? So with that, I'm going to actually share my screen and let me know that this works. Can you all see that?
Not yet, no.
Okay. Let's give it a little bit of time. Okay, can you see it now? Yeah. Okay.
Yes, that looks great.
Okay, there we go. And you should be able to see me on the side as well, and and the chat box is also there. But actually, you know what? We don't even need to. We're such a small group that if anybody has a question or a comment or anything, just raise your hand and unmute the microphone and then go ahead. So we don't need to actually even use the chat box. All right. Okay. So. Oh. Okay, so this is, as we said, this is some of the items that I'm hoping to cover today. What is networking? Because very often, I think for international students, it's a little bit of a cultural shock, right? When you get to the U.S., certainly that was the case for me. What exactly? I think it's a very confusing topic for anybody. What exactly networking means, and it covers a lot of different things. And sometimes it has these, unnecessary negative connotations. And so networking can capture a lot of broad concepts. So I think it's useful for us to talk about what that means for you guys as students, and especially as international students, to kind of understand what networking means in a US job search context, and then how it actually fits into your job search overall. And then we'll look at some networking tools. So I like to sort of demystify the big level conversation and bring it down and make sure you guys have some very practical tools that you can use. So I'll take you through a few networking tools that I use with my students that have tended to be helpful over the years. And then I think a key component of what I really want to talk about is using first of all, using LinkedIn to find and build connections, because that's important, but also networking emails and how to write these networking emails. A lot of times, I think either people are shy to write emails, right? Because it's kind of strange to just write to an alumni, and then you don't know, so many times people tell me, well, what am I supposed to say? What am I supposed to do? And So it's very, very important to get that, even it may be a very short email, but it's very important to get that right, because that's your first interaction with that person. So so I have some templates, and we'll go through some different scenarios, and I'll walk you through what you might say in different contexts. Okay? Okay, so this is a statistic. 80% of today's jobs are landed through networking. And so this quote actually is from 2014. And my, not necessarily based on research, but my gut feeling is that it's gotten worse. And that, it's even, the numbers are even not worse necessarily, but the numbers are even more, so that you get, that you get most of your jobs through networking. And very often what ends up happening is, and this is something I constantly hear from students, and in fact, I think it was a couple of days ago, I was coaching it was a Hopkins student, and this is from her. So she told me that she applied to 200 jobs, and she got a reply back and a call for interview from 5 people. And she's a very strong candidate. I mean, we went through her resume, and she's an extremely strong candidate. And she and I did a mock interview, and she's very good. So even with all of that, 200 applications is what converted to 5 replies, right? So basically, it's 2.5% is what you can expect to get by just apply. So all she was doing, so I asked her, were you following up? Or she said no, she didn't do anything at all. She was simply applying, right? So if you were just applying on your school's job board, or you're applying on other job boards like Career Builder, and there are lots of places that students can find jobs, and certainly that's a good thing to do. It's a good place to start, but that just goes to show that doing only that and not the networking piece leads to 2.5% is the statistic from her. Now, it may not be that bad, but still my point is, don't spend, all your time applying and no time networking. It's actually better maybe to apply to, I say apply to 30, 40 jobs. That's reasonable, but then pick half of that and then try to do some networking around that, so that you can convert some of those, what I call sort of cold applications, into something a little bit warmer. Okay? So I always like to, I love this little exercise here. So you tell me, you can turn on your microphone, Ariel, if you like, and you tell me which of these is, out of these, which one would you pick? So is it something you do because you want to get a job? Is it something that is easy for outgoing people, but very difficult for shy people? Is it something you do?
Yeah, I agree.
Okay.
Totally agree.
You agree? Is it an activity you do prior to just when you need it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Probably, yeah.
Okay. And then D is the process of building long-term trust-based relationships. So you are absolutely right.
Agree.
Most people pick, this is why there's this, little bit of a sometimes unfortunate, the connotations around networking, because a lot of times people think A, B, or C. And there's a little bit of truth to A, B, and C. But really, the answer is D.
Oh. Wow.
So you thought you were thinking the others might be true as well?
Yeah, I think ABCD are all true.
Yeah. What has been your experience? Has it been is it been difficult because you feel like it's you're not you're not it's not easy because you're not outgoing?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. So that's, that could be the case, but you'll see today if, networking does not mean necessarily going to a big event and talking to a lot of people, right? So even when
Yeah.
I always say to my students, it's let's say you go to a career fair, right? On campus, or even if it's an off campus, a conference or something, and you don't have to go and talk to a lot of people. You can just quietly pick one person or two people. And to be honest with you, I would say that even having a really, really good conversation with one person who will remember you, right? And you have a really nice conversation and it's something substantial, that's probably more worthwhile. I would argue even one conversation like that where the person remembers you is probably more worthwhile than trying to go and speak to a lot of people, because they may not remember you and it may not be the most effective strategy. So don't worry if you feel like you're overwhelmed. Is that the problem? Do you feel like it's just too much and it's difficult?
I think it's hard to talk to a recruiter in a career fair because I didn't know them.
Yeah.
And like to start a conversation and then remember you, I think is the hardest part.
Yeah.
Like making yourself very special.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And also when there's lots and lots of people, right?
Yeah, right.
Yes. I'm with you. So I'm not a big fan of these events and career fairs either. And, people think that I'm a very outgoing, I'm a friendly person, but I'm definitely not an extra. I do not like these events and so I can tell you, so what I do is I try to find there are always remember the recruiters, some of these recruiters, they're there, but they're not exactly enjoying
right.
either, right? So
yeah. I agree with you.
there's more people like you and probably like me than there is. This is the myth where everybody thinks everybody else likes to mingle and chat, and the reality is most people don't, right? So no one is really having a good time. So what I do is I try to look out for, there's somebody quietly in the corner. You don't go for the person where it's like surrounded by 10 students. There might be somebody who's free, right? So try to look for opportunities that are easy for you, that are easy for your personality, right? That's okay. I always say, work with your personality. Don't try to force yourself to do something you can't do, because then you'll never go back to the next career event, right?
Yeah.
Same thing that happens to me as well. So
Yeah.
you can try to just look for places where you can just quietly speak to one person. And sometimes it's in the corridors, sometimes it's in the bathroom, those are some of the places where you can really just chit chat, and talk about these things. And we'll cover, I don't want to talk too much about this piece about interacting, because that's what we're going to cover next time. But if, seeing as there's just you at the moment, I'm happy to discuss that a little bit. But yeah, so don't feel like it's just, it's something that only outgoing people do. That's because we're thinking of networking in this sort of like events and talking to people and have you heard that expression, working a room, where somebody goes and talks to a lot of people and gets their cards? And so, that's one way, and some people are good at that, but most people are not, myself included. I never work a room. I usually pick one or two people, or they pick me, and I'm happy to talk to. I like talking to one person for a long time, right?
Yeah.
And the reality is, usually that one or two people will remember me. We become friends by the end of the, and that interaction usually ends up being a lot better than had I spoken to 50 people and just kind of gotten their cards, and it's just what everybody else is doing. Okay.
Yeah, I will try that next time.
Yes. What else has been your experience? What else has been a challenge for you?
I think it's like to introduce myself in a very professional way.
Yeah.
And I feel very embarrassed when I talk very professional things.
Yeah. So let's get through this. So that is exactly the topic of this, and then next week we're going to cover exactly that. And in fact, I have templates for exactly how to introduce yourself. Okay.
Okay.
So we'll leave that for next time, or at the end of this material, if we have some time, then we can talk about that. Okay.
Yeah. Sure.
But the most important point I want to make here is, if you leave networking until just when you need a job, that's when it becomes a little bit uncomfortable, right? Especially, I think, culturally. I think, I'm sure we have similar backgrounds in that way. It's not easy it looks like you're asking for something, right? And it's just not an easy way to, it just doesn't feel comfortable. Which is why it's important to try and build these relationships over time, so that when it's time for you to say, oh, I'd like to have coffee with you, or I'd like to talk to you about something, it doesn't feel as transactional as, I need a job, I need an internship, can I speak to you? So try and think of networking as a long-term process that you do over a year. Before, are you in your first year or in your second year?
First year.
Okay, very good, excellent. So this is perfect. You have plenty of time. So of course, naturally now you're probably looking for your internship, but think about the longer term. You have a year and a half before you're full time. So this is a very good time to build relationships.
Yeah.
Which means you don't even have to don't even talk about the job. Okay. You can get to know the people that are important to you without even bringing up a specific job.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Did we have somebody just join us?
Yeah. I don't know where it go. It just disappeared.
Did somebody just join? Okay. He might get back.
Yeah. I think it's a boy.
Yes, I saw him for a brief moment there.
Yeah.
All right, so this is where I just want to tell you also where networking fits into an effective job search.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, here we go. Umar? Umar, can you hear me? And he's got.
No. Oh, he said he can get the audio.
Okay. Umar, can you hear me? If you can hear me, can you put your microphone on mute?
Oh, he can hear anybody.
Okay, so that's something probably on your end, Umar. Just check your sound system, but can you put your microphone on mute?
Ariel, this is Paul. She put hers on. Never mind. I think everybody's on mute now except for you and I.
Yeah.
Oh, it's Ariel. Okay. Ariel, can you put yourself on mute until?
Yeah. Sure.
Okay. Great. Thank you. And feel free to, we'll unmute you when you have a question. So, okay, so these are the 5 stages of a job search. This is a typical 5 stages, okay? And so networking is, you've already done a little bit of work around what types of skills and talents you have, what kinds of companies and jobs and industries you're interested in. And I normally, when I work with my students, we always try to make some sort of short list, right? Because otherwise, when you're just kind of applying here and there, like this student who applied to 200 jobs, it was like, I only met her at the stage of interviewing, so I didn't, I hadn't worked with her throughout, but I wouldn't want anybody applying to 200 jobs. That's a lot of applications, right? So the idea is to kind of narrow down to, okay, what are the industries that I want to apply to? What are the key roles that I want to target? Because not only does this help you with all the other stuff after that, including your resume and your cover letter, but it also helps you with your networking, right? Because there's no time to network with 1,000 people, right? And certainly no time if you want to really build relationships, the kind of relationships I was talking about, then it has to be a smaller group of people, which is why it's good if the earlier that you can figure out what your interests are and have some sort of target list of, even if it's not target list of companies, at least a target list of the industries and the types of roles you're looking for, will be very, very helpful. Okay? And then you go on to, that helps you then, when you have that, then it helps you to position yourself in a very strong way with your resume and your cover letter and all of that. And then, of course, you get to know people in your industry. That's the idea, and you build relationships, right? So, as an example, so what major are you? What major are you? What degree are you doing, Ariel?
I major in electrical and computer engineering, and I'm a master's student right now.
In engineering, okay. And what kind of roles are you looking for?
Right now it's only for internship.
Yeah.
Like hardware or software engineer, something like that.
Okay, so you're looking for software engineering type positions.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Umar, can you hear us? Okay, he may not be able to. Okay, if you can't, I don't know if you can see the slides. Okay, all right. Okay, so if you know those are the roles, right? Then try to think of, try to make sure that your networking is geared towards people in that industry. Okay. So I'm assuming you're looking for roles that are either directly engineering or some sort of roles that have to do with coding maybe, right? And then data roles and things like that. So there's, there are a lot of related roles that you should, at least for an internship, there's a lot of roles that are very good fit for engineering. So what you want to do is identify those roles, and then maybe even better, identify specific companies, and then you'd have a much better networking strategy. Okay. Okay, so this I actually just like to share it because it's an interesting. It was written by this lady Lynn Waymon, and it's about how you make contacts and how you sort of, what does this whole business of networking mean, right? Because really, it's about building trust. That's really what it really comes down to. Ultimately, at the end of the day, is especially if you don't want the networking to be about, oh, I'm networking to get a job, but rather the longer term type of networking, then it's all about building relationships that are mutually beneficial. And there's this business of more and more trust. And so, she'd sort of come up with this framework. And I like to start with it, but I actually really like, we have our own sort of way of simplifying this. I feel like it's a little bit too too many layers there. So what she says is, there's some people that you meet that it's like accidents. You just meet them. You'd probably never meet them under any other circumstances, and you would probably never meet them again. Then you have acquaintances, who are people that you meet them, you know them a little bit, but they're not people that you interact with very regularly. Now, associates, that's the important one. So associates are people that you do interact with under different circumstances, right? So your associates for you is your classmates are a group of associates. Your professors are a group of associates. Anyone at Hopkins, all the alumni, that's a group of associates, right? You're a national of which country? Taiwan. Okay, good. It's a good thing. It's a good thing I didn't say China. I'm glad I asked. So I was just going by your name, and I just, I forget China. So Taiwan. Okay, so you probably may have some Taiwanese contacts here in the U.S., right? So that's a group, right, that you are associated with. So the idea here is there's some commonality that the group shares, and you're part of that group. And as a result of being part of that group, they are your associates. So now once in your career, as you progress, you'll have your internship in the summer. So that firm, those people will become your associates. And then eventually you'll have a job. They'll become your associates. So for me, my previous careers, my previous colleagues, my bosses, they're all associates. Okay? Now the key thing is, moving from associates to actors. Now, actors are people where you are actually doing a little bit more than the fact that they're automatically an associate, right? So like I explained, let's take the example of, everybody, your Hopkins network, they're all associates. The actors are people that you're actually interacting with, right? Because you're not interacting with everybody. The actors are the ones that you have some kind of a little bit of a relationship, and you are sharing information. Maybe you're occasionally meeting with them, talking to them. There's a little bit more than simply the fact that you belong to this group. Advocates and allies, and this is why I think her system is a little bit too, doesn't need to be this. Advocates and allies are practically the same thing. And those are people who are actually advocating on your behalf, right? Now, they are people who know you very well. And because they know you, and now they trust you, and they will vouch for you. They're willing to refer you to somebody. They're willing to make an introduction. They are people who will work on your behalf. They're an advocate for you. That's why the word advocate, right? Eventually, if you do your networking very well, let's say you get to know a couple of alumni, and these alumni, they really like you, and they know that you're capable. Maybe after you do your internship in the summer, there'll be, of everybody you meet, there might be one or two people who are very impressed with you and like you a lot, and they are your advocates. Allies are very much similar. It just simply means even more closer. I mean, your friends, your family, your favorite professor, these are people who are literally they're just, there's more of a personal relationship, and they're by your side, and they're your ally no matter what. Okay? So what I normally have students do is, so we simplify this a little bit, and I think her idea is right. I think allies and advocates, we can put that's the highest level, right? And we can group those together. Actors are important, right? So we have to separate. Actors is very important because that's where you're trying to convert the associates into actors, right? That's kind of where the big jump happens. And then associates is really the one that, the other one, that category I like to cover. You can add a few acquaintances in there, which is why I put it in parentheses, but, I'm not too worried about the associates. I would say I'm not worried about the acquaintances. So start with your associate groups, the different groups you belong to, and that's the first level of analysis. Then think of people who are actors. Those are the ones who, within those groups, you have some sort of relationship with and interact with. And then the next level are people who really know you pretty well and enough to vouch for you, enough to say, I stand by this person, I recommend this person. Okay? So the idea of building the real way of doing networking, which is why it takes a long time, is to get some of your associates, you want to convert them to actors, right? And then from actors, you want to convert them to allies and advocates. And of course, the pyramid gets narrow and narrow, right? You're not going to, you have, let's say, you have 100 classmates. The actors are going to be, maybe 25 of them are people you regularly interact with, right? And then allies and advocates might be 4, or even 2 is great, okay? So what I ask students to usually do is break up your, look at your different, they tend to be the 3 categories. So you have the first place for almost any student, especially if you're a student in the US and you're an international student, then typically international students who have not been here for a long time, the strongest network you have is your school's network, right? The alumni network. And remember to make sure that you are tapping into as wide a school network as possible. A lot of times students forget it's not just their degree program, right? That's a good place to start, right? Whoever graduated from your own, from the master's program that you're in. But there are a lot of other related master's programs, and there are, thousands of students who graduate from Hopkins every year. And then also, then you keep moving, you keep making that bigger and bigger, right? So I always say start with your school's graduates, then similar programs, and then include undergrad, because undergrad is by numbers, it's very powerful. And then Hopkins of course, it's a very well-known brand. Hopkins is a phenomenal network in the US and all over the world. I mean, as far as technical degrees and science degrees are concerned, it's probably one of the top 5 schools, and everybody knows Hopkins, everybody recognizes it. And, there are probably hundreds of thousands of alumni who are doing exactly the job that you are trying to recruit for. Okay? So it's really important to target within your school and your alumni, and it's really important to start there and see who are the people that you can really have some sort of contact with and build a relationship with. And then you move on to professional, which is, at the moment, you may not have too much of that, but as soon as, when you do your summer internship, right there, that's your first group of professional people, right? And so make sure that you get to know as many, a lot of times I tell students, your internship in the summer, as important as the work, is making sure you meet as many people as possible in that firm and making sure that you build some close relationships. Even if you don't want an offer from that place, still, right? Because those people are connected to other people and they're in your industry. So it's very important to build those relationships. And you'll see, this is how it builds up. So you have your summer, then when you graduate, you have your first job, and that's how it goes. And then finally, personal is anyone you know outside of either of these categories. And so so for my international students, it usually tends to be their country's network, right? So it's usually the Taiwanese who are here in the US, or even back home, who have connections here. It could also just be communities and clubs you belong to. Some of my international students, they do volunteer work, or, they belong to a sporting club or something like that. So those are all, they say, like, let's say you belong to a gym, right? Even that, if it's outside an external gym, that's a potential group of people, right? So that's what personal means. Okay? So this is what you're trying to get to. What does your network show? Where are the gaps? What would you like to adjust, improve? Okay? But I think for you guys, very often what I find is obviously it's very skewed towards the school and the alumni, right? That's the strongest point. And then you might be having a little bit of the professional, little bit of the personal. So those will be sort of gaps, but they're not really gaps in your case because it's normal in your circumstances. And if you're, if you're starting out in your early 20s, that's absolutely normal. Okay. All right, so moving on to networking tools. So I have a few different ways of tracking your networking. So now this is important, right? Because now remember when you're trying to build these contacts, now you have your industry, you have identified some companies, now you're trying to network and build some relationships, right? Or it could be that you actually, like my other student, you have applied to jobs, but you still need to network to try to get to know, try to get in front of them, right? So the easiest thing, and that's why I call it old school, is, you just to remember, right? Because otherwise you don't know who you contacted, who you talked to. So just a very, very simple name of contact, institution, and those things, right? So you can easily capture this on Excel, or now I think they probably even have a bunch of apps that allow you to kind of just put in the basic information when you are meeting people and talking to people. Okay. And so there's actually another student of mine, but she just, after she graduated, she was in her first job. And I kind of like to say, so you have to keep your notes meaningful to you, right? They don't have to make sense to anybody else. They just have to make sense to you, right? So this is I love her notes. I always share this with students. So she graduated, and then she got a job at the National Geographic, and she was there for about a year. And, after a year, it was, actually, if I remember correctly, I think she did do OPT, the OPT that you have for a year. And then she was, she kind of had to make some decisions. And so that's why, even after a year, she had to kind of figure out what her next step was. And so these were her notes, and I love her notes because they were quite funny, but, they make sense to her, and she remembers, right? So this guy, Sam, so she was at the National Geographic. And so, this guy, Sam, was actually a very important contact, but the word flaky means that they don't reply, and he never replies to email, and she was frustrated by that. And so the question is, if somebody doesn't reply to you by email, is it okay to call them? Okay. And I think it's once somebody has not replied a couple of times, it's okay to try to reach out by phone and leave a short message. But at some point you have to move on, right? Because if someone's really not replying, then, it's sometimes better to deal with other people. So this is just to give you an example of, this is the kind of networking that she was doing. So Cindy, she had a great relationship with. Cindy is what we call an advocate for her, because she offered to be a reference. She liked her and liked my students in work. And she actually was, discussing the possibility of working together in the future on something. This guy, Mark, was, she was working in a department that she really liked, but they had not hit it off in the past. So she was a little bit uncertain. So this is what I mean about very personal commentary, which doesn't need to make sense to anybody else. They just need to make sense to you. And of course you can share that with your coach, and it's personal information, and, it's protected, it's private. So you don't have to worry. But it's important that you get a sense of, the point of this is it's to see, where can I put my effort so that you don't waste your time with things that may not work out. Okay. The second tier tracker, and this is much more what I like and what I was talking about before, which is that you actually segment by industry and functional role. Okay. And then you start with companies that you know. And then a really easy trick is to search and add competitors, right? So for example, if, I have so many students who want to, they want an engineering or a software engineering or data analyst role at a company like Uber, right? So if you add Uber, then you should add Lyft and other ride sharing companies like that. And then actually you should add other companies that use a similar model, that, matching marketing model, because as an engineer, as a software engineer, there's a lot of similarity there, right? So this is why it's nice to think of a company and have a few companies in your mind. Then it's easier to be like, oh wait, who else does this? And then who else does similar things to this? All right. And then the most important thing, of course, for the networking is listing all your contacts, alumni, professional. So if you go back to your categories, alumni, professional, personal, right? So look at anyone you know who works in those companies or can get you an introduction to someone there. So usually what you'll find, and we'll move on to this now about how to get an introduction, is that it's not likely that you might, even if you list all your, so let's say you picked a company, let's say it was Twitter, and you listed down alumni, professional, personal, your contacts. You may not have too many direct contacts. You might have a few, but direct contacts, there might not be that many. But you probably have a lot of people who can introduce you to somebody there. Okay? So these are some resources there. I think the LinkedIn company pages are a good place to go. Career Beam and Career Vault are both very good by industry. I don't know how strong they are in engineering. They're very strong in finance. They're very strong in consulting. I'm not sure how strong they are in engineering, software engineering per se, but in general, they're a resource that's highly popular with students. Okay? And then we also have our own guides and video content, and it's segmented by industry, and tech is one of our industry verticals. So we have guides that are specific to tech. Okay? And then the second tier tracker looks something like this, where, as you can see, it's about going company by company and your contacts, and then it's important to track your conversations, right? And put in your notes. It's a little bit more granular. All right. So let's move on now to using LinkedIn to finding connections. But are there any questions before I do that?
I think I'm fine. No questions.
Okay. All right. Okay, so here's the beauty of, this is the thing about LinkedIn that a lot of people don't really understand right away. So LinkedIn isn't so much about your immediate connections, right? It's important. It is very, very important to build your immediate connections, right? Because that's how you get your network. But remember, you're already connected to them, right? So, but where the power of LinkedIn is in the second degree connection, because your people that you're connected to, they're all connected to a bunch of people, right? So that is your network, because your immediate network, the people you're connected to, you're connected to anyway, right? But the really, really powerful part of LinkedIn is that second degree connection. So I like to use this example of 300, but sometimes for students it's even less, and that's okay. Let's even say it's 100, right? You have 100 people on your LinkedIn profile, and I always say to students, even if you don't have 100, okay, well then make it a goal to get to 100, and that's not too difficult. If you add your classmates and your professors and a few alumni and some contact, I mean, you'll get to 100 pretty easily, right? So that's your immediate contacts. Now those 100 have another, let's say each of them have 100, right? Or each of them have 200. That becomes the important part of your network. So when you connect to a professor, you are essentially getting access to that professor's entire network, right? because you can actually see who they're connected to and all that. Does that make sense? So that's very important to understand, that the reason you want to build your network is because of who they are connected to, not just the direct connection. Okay? So that's exactly where the main point is. So building your network, you might as well forget about what's on the left-hand side there, the passive. That's just my way of saying, you know, if you do nothing, at least do this. But it's not, you know, it's really not. Accepting invitations you get and replying to messages and checking LinkedIn once every 2 weeks is not really a LinkedIn strategy. I mean, you might as well not, you know, that's not going to be very effective. But you really want to do some of the things that are on the right hand side, right? Especially at this age and at this stage, you've got to be able to build enough people in your pool of contacts, right? So you have to take the initiative and you have to look for connections. You have to send invitations to classmates and professors, and now after you do your internship, try and add as many people as you can from your internship. And then the next thing to do is to make sure that you engage. LinkedIn allows you now very, very easily to have you seen this where you can, you're on LinkedIn? Yeah. Have you seen the congratulate people? So, you know, when somebody gets a job or somebody gets a promotion, you can very easily, it used to be that you can just like that, right? You press like and that's all. You know, now you can congratulate with one button. Literally, it says congratulate so and so, right? And when you click on that, what it's actually doing is it's generating a message. It's generating an actual message to that person saying congratulations on your new job, congratulations on your promotion, and then you can actually go and change that text or make it personal. But at the very least, you can click, and at least congratulate, you know, people who are, and now they allow you to wish people a happy birthday, and they made it very simple, and they literally they'll just go through like this, and all you have to do, if you don't want to do anything else, is click. Now, if you have some time, it's nice to personalize those messages and add a little bit more. So what I do is so my recommendation to you guys is to check LinkedIn every day. I check it probably once every 2 days. Every 2 days, every three days, and I quickly go through that process of connecting with people and sending out messages and things like that. And what I've noticed is it's surprising how many people reply back and say thank you, and you know, because not many people take the trouble. So they're surprised to hear from me, or they're happy to hear from me, and they say, "Oh, thank you so much," and you know, and that's lovely. So it's actually, I was surprised by the fact that it required so little effort, but it made a huge difference. It clearly made some people very happy, right? And it's always nice to get a message saying congratulations or hello or happy birthday or whatever. So these are the little things. These are the little personal things that make all the difference in the world. Okay? So this I'm not going to go through too much in the interest of time, but and we'll try to share some of this information anyway with you after. But this is just really about invitations, whether you are sending invitations or whether you're receiving invitations. You know, there are different types of invitations from different types of people, right? So you kind of need to judge, okay, who are these people? I mean, some are people you know because you met them, like your family and friends and coworkers and people, you know, somebody you know them. So those they're obvious people to send invitations to. They're also obvious people to accept an invitation from, right? And then the indirect part, I think, is the one that's critical there. That's the one where you know through other people and you have a lot of shared connections. Or what happens is you go to an event, like an employee event or a panel or something, and I would say immediately, right away, on that day itself, you should try and connect on LinkedIn, right? You should send them a note and say, it was nice to meet you, and connect with them. Now, they may not accept your invitation, but it's worth a try. And if you were to do it right after meeting them, there's a much, much bigger chance that they would actually accept the invitation. Okay. And then relevant connections are people you don't know, but they are extremely relevant to you, right? Because of industry experience, education. So the alumni is a perfect example. And I'll go through in the next slide how you contact alumni and what you say and all of that. But that piece is important because you don't know them, right? So they are strangers. However, they're important to your search because they're doing what you're doing, and alumni are a very good example of this. Right? And then of course there are people who are out of your network. You don't know them, but they are relevant. And how do you sort of get to them? You can always send them an invitation. It never hurts. Sometimes it's accepted. Sometimes it's not. The one strategy I can definitely tell you is the more personal you make it, the more you can reach out to somebody and say something more than I'd like to connect with you on LinkedIn. If you explain to them why, then there is a chance that even someone who doesn't really know you will say yes. Okay. So like I said, make it personal. Always send a customized message when you connect. So it was a pleasure to meet you at wherever. I enjoyed our conversation. Good luck with your projects, or something that references them, right? Because that means you were listening, you were interested, you say something about something they mentioned. Okay. And you sort of say, I would love to keep in touch. Now, a message like this is what I'm saying. So let's say you go to some event where like a professor, some big person is giving a talk. This is one way. If you do it right away, and if you send them a note and you really tell them that you really enjoyed the conversation, you mention some things in the conversation, you mention some things about what they're working on, and say, I'd really like to keep in touch, there is a chance that they will accept your invitation, right? They may not always, but it certainly shows effort on your part and interest on your part. And it's I know that I personally have often accepted invitations from people because they put the effort into, really trying to understand, what I was saying or doing, or, they kind of provided that value or showed that value and made that effort. And so I, accept. Okay. So asking for introductions, this is the part where students are always, they always say, well, what do you mean when I say, you have to ask them for an introduction? And I'm like, well, what does that mean? How do I ask for an introduction? Have you had that situation?
Yeah. Like that, just like that.
Okay, and what has happened? Have you been able to reach out and ask people?
I think after like meeting with them in person, I'm lazy to write an email back and keep in touch.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's difficult. It's not easy. But that's why we make it easy, or we try to make it easy. We try to give you guys very easy ways of writing these messages. And one thing I know, you figure out how to write an effective email, right? You can keep using that over and over again in a similar context. So that way you don't have to feel, even if you're feeling lazy, it's, you set it up in such, I know exactly what you mean. I mean, nobody likes to do this, and it's funny because I teach this and I'm the last person who's good at doing this, right? But I try to tell myself, okay, set up a system so that it's easy to send these messages out, right? You just replicate. You're an engineer, so right? You create a process so that it's easily replicable. However, you have to make sure that even though it's replicable does not mean generic. It does not mean it's the exact same message to the same person. Replicable means you set up a framework and you replicate the framework, but you adjust the language to suit each person. Does that make sense? Okay. So I don't know if you've heard this. This is a very popular American expression. It's easy to remember. So keep your networking emails very simple. Okay, introduction. What's the reason for the email? And then make the ask clear. What is it that you're asking for, right? And then the closing. So the ask is the most critical piece of this, right? Always try to think, what do I want? What am I asking for? And the key thing is, I always say to students, don't ask for a lot of different things. Ask for one thing, okay? And make sure that the one thing that you're asking for is clear and it's easy for them to say yes to. So a very good example of this is, students will write emails and they'll say, oh, I'd like some career advice on this subject. And also, do you have contacts in this? And can you introduce me? And, that's a lot going on there, right? And so not only does the person who's reading this have, they're looking at, when it's me, if I look at an email then I'm like, okay, I can't deal with this right now. I'll deal with this later. And then I may never deal with it, right? Because there was just too much going on and I couldn't really focus. Also, you're making it difficult for me now because I'm like, okay, she's asking for this. I don't know what to pick here, right? Whereas if you ask for one small thing, if you simply said to me, I would like to speak to you for 5 minutes on the phone, then it's clear, right? And then 5 minutes doesn't sound like a big deal and I can say yes. Okay? So I know we're running up against time, so let me go quickly through these examples and then we're done. But the examples are important, and then I'll make sure that you have these examples for later. So that way you can kind of use these templates. And I would suggest don't copy exactly, because you don't want we don't want every student writing the exact same thing, but it hopefully gives you a little bit of an idea of how to write these emails. I think it's important that students, have some sort of template or some examples. Otherwise, I can tell you all kinds of things, but then you're still like, I don't know how to write the actual email. So which is why I think it's very useful, especially for international students. They only really understand when they see examples. So that's why we provide the examples. But I always say try to adjust it to you, okay, a little bit. And once you adjust it, keep it as your main copy, and then you can replicate it. So this is one very, very popular category of email, an email that you might have to send out, right? So, oh, I'm sorry. I thought that was switched off. Sorry about that. This is something this is exactly what we were talking. Remember when we were talking about LinkedIn and how, you have to reach out to your immediate people to get introductions. And if you really want to access the 90,000 people, that's really your network, then this becomes really important. And these are, by the way, every example I'm showing you is actual people. These are actual examples of what has been written. And so I'm not making any of this up. And I just think this is very, very effective. And so we're using things that worked, right? This happens to be someone who reached out to me. So I've changed the names, but this was someone who reached out to me and wrote this, and I found it. I was like, yes, of course, because of the way it was written, and it was very clear. And I said, sure, I'd be happy to make that introduction. So she said, she made it very clear what she's applying. She introduced herself and made clear what she wanted. And she also, now remember, she says, if you are comfortable making the introduction. Okay, so make sure when you're asking people to make referrals for you and introductions, put in a little bit of wording that says, if you're okay with this, if you're comfortable with this, because you want to ask for something, you want to be direct, but you have to let them be able to make that decision, and you have to let them know it's okay if, that's just the cultural way of doing things. Is to in America and the US, people are very forthright. They will ask for, that's the whole networking thing. There's no harm in asking, but the language should be softened so that the other person has a way of, if they can't do it for whatever reason, like for example, maybe she says your friend Sarah Michaels, maybe I'm not friends with Sarah Michaels anymore, or I can't remember Sarah Michaels, or sometimes we have people in our in the LinkedIn, I'm like, who is this Sarah Michaels, or even though she's in my network, we're not on good, you never know, right? So you have to always say, if you feel comfortable, if it's okay with you, I would really appreciate if this is possible. Could you could you make a connection between us? Okay. So this is your situation right there. And this is specifically for reaching out to alumni, or at least if you are reaching out to an alumni, make sure that you put in the subject line that you are a Hopkins student and this is an alumni request. That's very, very important, because in the US, the system is that the alumni network is very strong, and especially for some schools, and I think Hopkins is one of them, from what I understand, the alumni network is very supportive and very strong. Almost all schools in the US has that concept of alumni helping other alumni. Okay, so no, it is understood. It's part of the culture that if somebody that you went to school with, right? So it could be undergrad, it could be graduate school. If a student reaches out to you, it's protocol that you reply, right? That's why in the US, this alumni business, you'll notice after a while, when you become an alum, people will reach out to you forever, 20 years down the road. That's how it works. They help you, and then as you go along, you help students through your school. That's very important. That's the system here, and they are supposed to reply to you. Now, do they always reply to you? No, you might have to follow up. Sometimes even if they reply, it's not particularly warm, it's not super useful, but at least the concept is they're not strangers. If they went to your school, you have every right to reach out to them as a student of that school. That's kind of what I want to get through, right? As a student of Hopkins, you can reach out to absolutely anybody who went to Hopkins. And that's normal. That's not like, them getting an email from me. They're not going to be like, who's this strange person? It is a completely accepted normal practice to get emails from students from the schools that you went to. But make sure that you put in the subject line that you are a Hopkins student and that you're looking for an alumni conversation. Okay? And then you see that you can go through the text here, but it's basically just to say, introduce yourself, be specific about what it is that you want to talk about, and then make the ask very, very simple, right? I would be happy for 15 minutes is, people will usually say yes to 15. Now, that once you're on the phone with them, hopefully 15 minutes becomes 20 minutes, half an hour, but make it easy. 15 minutes, 10 minutes, people would be, it's easy for them to say yes to that. Also, make sure you say that you would be happy to work around their schedule. Okay, and I can't tell you how many times students have written emails and they propose the times that they're free, and they expect the other person to, and that is, you absolutely cannot do that. Okay, nobody because you're the one who's asking. I think it is obvious. That's why you're laughing. But for some students, apparently it's not obvious. And this is not even international students. I have had domestic students request alumni conversations indicating when they are free, right? So, and then we get complaints saying, why can't these students write proper emails? So this is why we want to make sure you write proper emails. So if you're contacting alumni, make sure you are polite and you follow protocol, because remember, the other thing is alumni, you represent your students, right? A lot of bad behavior from too many students and alumni get upset. And so, they don't like it if they get a ton of emails that are, where it's that kind of thing. And then they'll complain. So it's very, very important that students, just like alumni have an obligation to you, students also have an obligation to follow protocol. And a good place to, I always say to every students, go to your career services. So in your case, we have Paul and Tessa here. They know how things work specifically for your school. So you can always ask them specific questions. You can get them to review your email. Ask them, is this okay? Are there edits or spelling mistakes, or they'll be great to go in person and have them review what you've done. Okay.
Yep, definitely let us know.
Yeah. It's a very good. I don't know why. I mean, I really wish students would right. You were saying, Ariel, that it's overwhelming to these emails, but actually, if you have a few templates like this, you can do this very quickly, and then go to your career office. They're there. They're available, and they're there. And if I be like, here, I have 10 emails. Can you please review them, right? I always tell students, we're here to help you. I mean, it's not like this is our job to look at your emails and just make sure that they're good before it is the job of career services to make sure that students are writing appropriate emails, and so they will be more than happy to check your stuff. So don't hesitate to use those resources. Then you won't feel overwhelmed, right? Because you have partners who are helping you and helping you get there. And then once you get to know Tessa and Paul, and then you have a relationship, and it becomes a lot easier to pass by the career center and get their help with emails and cover letters and stuff. Okay. And then there are a couple more examples. This one is a lot like the previous one, except it's more like you're looking for a job, and it's just it's worded a little differently, right? This is for a student who's graduating, and they're referencing a conversation. So this person, Sarah, knows Reynolds a little bit, well enough to ask her for a little bit more than just this is not the first time she's interacting with her, right? So Reynolds is somebody she has interacted with before, and so now she can be very upfront about, hey, I'm looking for a job. This is what's going on. Would you be able to guide me, because I want to do the job that you're doing. I want to do a similar job to what you're doing, and that's a very direct ask, which makes sense in that situation. And then this is the thank you note, which is very important. Okay. Every time you have one of these informational, what we say when I say informational interview, I basically mean any kind of networking interaction that is not a formal interview, right? Where you're the one who met you instigated a meeting and met with somebody, make sure that you thank them. Now, almost everybody knows to send a thank you note, but 95% of students probably won't do this. So if you do, it will definitely be noticed. Okay, so I get thank you notes all the time, and and then occasionally I get a wonderful thank you note, which really tells them they appreciated the time, they mentioned something we talked about, and they send me something, and they're like, oh yeah, we talked about this, and I read this article, and so that's how you show that you're invested in the relationship, and you value the person, and you value their time. And once you do all of that, they're much more likely to want to stay in touch, to help you later, right? Any questions? This is basically my last slide. I don't know what happened to this. There are a couple of students' names who are showing up. I don't know if they can still hear us. I don't really see video. Anyway, we have the recording, so it's okay. Ariel, do you have any questions?
I think I'm pretty fine right now.
Okay.
Yeah, no more questions.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
So these are some final tips. Okay. So remember, the big takeaway is build your network. Okay. And then invest time in these relationships, and you have plenty of time, right? Don't just think about your internship for the summer. Think about your job search for your full-time search, and that's, you have more than a year to work on this. And then the written communications have got to be solid, and especially for international students, because you have to make sure that your emails there are no spelling mistakes, and that it follows protocol, as I was explaining. So work with one of the career coaches and make sure that you make a first good impression. Okay. And so if you have any more, and I'm sorry, there was a lot to cover, and I just wanted to make sure you got all the information, so we are a little bit over time. But if you have any follow-up questions, then so this, Tessa and Paul, do you mind just putting in your information into the chat box, just so that the Ariel and others, and then that way when we're recording as well, hopefully that.
Sure. Did you get the slide?
I did get the slide. I can pull out the slide, but just in the interest of time, maybe. Or you know what I can do is when we circulate the information, we can also do that.
Okay. Okay. Let's see here. I can put in. The best thing to do is to go to Handshake, our online system.
Do you know that the system Handshake, Ariel?
Ariel, do you know that one? Definitely, if you haven't logged into that, I would do that as soon as you can. And also go to our website, which is
the Handshake, from my understanding, is kind of the main portal, right? Is that right? That's kind of where the jobs are. That's where. Yep. So Handshake,
all the jobs, all the internships, all of the events that we do, on-campus recruiting, resources, third-party access, that kind of stuff.
Okay. And then Handshake also has your contact, the career services contact information as well, right?
Yes, definitely.
Okay. Excellent. Okay. So if you're already.
Definitely you can email this address.
Yeah. So just to be clear, if you're on Handshake, that should give you all the information as far as Hopkins is concerned, right? Job postings, employer relations, career services, who you can speak to, all of that.
Coach, it has hours for our drop-in hours all over campus at different coffee shops. Ariel and others, you can feel free to stop by and talk with a career coach if you need to look over one of your staff's emails or talk about some of these networking best practices. There are lots of different ways to get in touch with us.
Okay. And then I've just provided some information as well. And so I have put in my email address there in case you have any follow-up questions. You can send an email to Paul or Tessa or me, and we can answer any immediate concerns. But otherwise, hopefully I'll catch you at the next session, because I think a lot of questions you had, Ariel, is about more, you had a lot about the interaction with people and how you have those conversations, which is very important. You're absolutely right. So we're going to cover that exact same way as we covered the networking emails, and we'll go through scenarios and examples and what you say in different situations, so that you're more comfortable, with the networking in person. Actually, no, it's not next Monday. It's the Monday after, right?
It's the 27th. Yeah, next Monday is the start of spring break.
After spring break, yeah, same time. All
Great.
right.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming, Ariel.
Bye. Catch you soon. Take care.
Yeah, you too. It's a really good presentation.
Oh, you're very welcome. Thank you for attending and for your participation. And I'll talk to you soon.
Yeah.
Okay.
See you.
Have a good day.